a little bit quicker when you baptize them in a 350-degree jacuzzi. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rob Reacts. Today I'm going to be reacting to a new channel that I've never reacted to, Justin Taylor. Justin Taylor is a former military officer, and he puts together some great content. I have not seen this video, but on my airframe theme, I wanted to go over this video because he's talking about why the Marines have a vertically lifting jet and the Navy does not. So we'll check this one out. I appreciate everybody's feedback. Tell me what you think and what you'd like me to review in the future. By God, I'll review it. I'm open to any suggestions that y'all might have. So let's take it away, Justin.
Hello, I have a weird fact for you. The United States has so far spent $20 billion on a version of this fighter jet that can take off and land straight up and down. Pretty neat, I'd say, and despite that, pilots avoid doing it as much as they possibly can. Why? If they're trying to avoid using a capability, why have it in the first place? I mean, the obvious answer is that taking off vertically means you don't need a full runway. But by doing that, you literally make the plane worse in every single metric from speed, ammo capacity, weight, costs, the list goes on. I mean, we have no issue of blasting jets off of the side of an aircraft carrier with a catapult, so why don't we just use that instead? Today, I want to talk about VTOL planes. Why have them in the first place? What strategies are used with those planes specifically compared to the nearly identical ones that can't hover? And finally, what makes that ability so important that the US is fine spending billions on a fun little trick that, while admittedly is the coolest fucking thing ever, could be argued as being useless. And finally, how this is just another example of the white man's tricknology, to borrow a term from the Nation of Islam. Thrust vector the like and subscribe button, and let's talk about it. But before we talk about floating planes, I want to talk to you about today's sponsor, the USCCA, a national gun owners organization with over 860,000 members. This is your one-stop shop for courses, classes, and access to legal support as it relates to the world of arming yourself to protect you and your family. By joining, you'll gain access to the Protector Academy, a secure online platform packed with reading material, video lessons, digital books, and more, along with an included subscription to Concealed Carry magazine. Ooh. Most importantly, you'll gain access to their network of legal representation and self-defense liability insurance. Even when you are forced into a self-defense situation and did everything right, it's still going to cost you time, money, and could still potentially land you in jail. With the USCCA's trusted legal reps, you can carry knowing that you're not just physically protected, but legally too. If you want to help support this channel, check out the link that is down here and in the description. It's too long for me to say out loud, but it'll send you to all of the unique training opportunities that are open for you if you sign up. Thank you to the USCCA for helping to sponsor the channel, and now back to the video. VTOL stands for vertical takeoff and landing, and as the name implies, means whatever that thing is can take off and land vertically. You guys just learned so much on this channel. What would you do without me? Typically, we associate this with helicopters like a Black Hawk or tilt-rotor aircraft like an Osprey. Fuck it, I'll throw a hot air balloon in there too, because I'm in a good mood today and they remind me that there is still whimsy to be had in these dark times. VTOL is a really convenient thing for things like transporting troops, which fighter jets don't do, sling loading heavy equipment, which fighter jets also don't do, or operating in far-reaching austere environments, which fighter jets kinda do for about 10 seconds before they turn around and go home. Generally speaking, the lighter, faster, and more stuff that your plane can carry, the better, but making a plane VTOL kinda just ruins all of that. But see, that capability removes one of the biggest threats to fighter aircraft, and it has a whole lot less to do with winning dogfights and a whole lot more to do with these big old slabs of concrete. Planes are incredibly expensive, hyper-deadly pieces of military equipment that can and will kill everything if you give them the chance. Runways are giant pieces of rock that have about as much strategic subtlety as my grade school PE teacher when he was, quote, checking for scoliosis. And on that day, I truly learned how far south my spine went. Landing strips, at least the ones not on top of giant boats or on your favorite stripper, don't move. I really gotta spread my jokes out more in these scripts. Giant stationary pieces of infrastructure make very, very, very easy targets. No surprise there. Also, planes live at the airport. That's kind of their thing, meaning your billions of dollars worth of planes sitting in a hangar are the easiest target in the world, along with all their fuel and ammo. But you don't actually need to attack the planes themselves to get the job done. That's because you can just shoot the runway. One explosion crater in the wrong place can literally make that entire strip totally useless to the now stuck fighter aircraft. Israel used this back in the day when they conducted a preemptive strike on Egypt, essentially wiping out their air force while it was still on the ground. And Ukraine regularly hits Russian planes sitting next to their own tarmacs. Alternatively, you can also fire half of your entire country's arsenal of tomahawks at a single target to make craters in the runway. I have qualms with that movie, and while that is one of them, my biggest one is that everyone thought I originally grew a mustache to look like Rooster. Even if the damage you inflict on the runway is repaired after just a couple of days, that's 2 days to make a big offensive push while the generic foreigner you're fighting against has degraded air assets. In the world of helicopters, this is solved by something called a FARP, or Forward Arming and Refueling Point. These are flexible, mobile locations that helicopters can land, typically just in a random field or tree clearing, where they can get more gas and ammo for the chain gun. FARPs are designed to be as mobile and flexible as possible, because they make juicy targets for things like rockets, artillery, or just anything. But they also make it so that the aircraft have a place to land and take off from that the generic bad guy people haven't figured out where it is yet. The closest thing traditional planes have to this is the Swedish practice of just using highways as decentralized runways. It works well for what their military is designed to do, but requires that the country you're fighting in and around has the massive infrastructure already in place. And this was the problem that engineers were trying to solve way back in the 1950s. How do we keep our planes from being sitting ducks at obvious, easy-to-hit targets, and provide air support in areas out of range from full-on airports? Having the ability to not be physically tied down to the location of a giant pre-made airport opens up a whole bag of strategies that you wouldn't have had otherwise, but more on that later. That was my attempt at a cliffhanger. Both the Western world and USSR denizens hopped on the trend, with the Brits developing the Harrier and the Soviets building the Yak. Spoiler alert, one saw decades of warfare, and the other only lives in short Wikipedia articles and video games. The Harrier at the time was the only legitimate VTOL-capable strike aircraft, hitting air fleets back in 1969, and was designed as a multi-role fighter. Multi-role here meaning it can dogfight and it can drop bombs, but absolutely falls into the master of none category of aircraft. But spending money and designing your VTOL aircraft to be a multi-role makes a lot of sense. That's because you need a lot more stuff in order to make it take off straight up. For the Harrier, that took the shape of vectored thrust using 4 swiveling exhaust nozzles. That means extra weight, and the more internal space taken up by hovering stuff, rather than things like more ammo, fuel, or anything else you'd want to cram in there. That gives you 2 issues. Number 1, more weight and less fuel space means you can't fly as far or carry as many munitions. Obvious problem there. And 2, a true vertical takeoff can take up to 3 times as much fuel as a traditional one, and those already take up a lot of gas. For reference, a Harrier, while hovering, burns a gallon of fuel every 4 seconds. This is why vertical takeoffs are actually avoided as much as possible. You don't want to burn up all of your fuel before you even get started going to your objective. If given the option of performing a traditional takeoff, pilots will choose the latter every single time. Typically, VTOL aircraft will aim for an STOL, or short takeoff and landing. As the name implies, this is shorter than a typical takeoff, but can still be performed in areas that aren't full-on runways. Helicopters, believe it or not, do the same thing. Plus, hovering is hard, so might as well get some momentum going forward. One thing to consider is that if you want to go VTOL, you cannot max out the fuel and ammo in your actual plane. You have to leave some behind, otherwise you can't safely take off. Take off vertically at least. Not the end of the world if you are going for a very specific target with a very specific munition, but you essentially have no tactical flexibility at that moment. All that is to say is that things like the Harrier or the F-35B aren't about putting the best possible plane in the sky. It's about putting a plane in the sky to begin with. The F-35B is the only one of the 3 F-35 designs that can do the cool hover thing. Keep in mind, regardless of anything bad I say about VTOL capabilities, a floating stealth fighter is cool as shit. But the B model has a significantly smaller combat radius compared to the A and C, and also lacks an internal gun, meaning it has to rock a gun pod if it wants to be able to switch to the knife fight mode. Both Harriers and F-35s are general-purpose aircraft, because if they're operating somewhere, they're probably the only aircraft we can get in that particular area. So they need to be able to do everything okay-ish, not necessarily specialize in one thing and then leave a capability gap somewhere else. F-35s and Harriers have been really the only widespread use of VTOL aircraft. You also only see actual focus on that kind of tech from the US and a handful of NATO partners, and there's a good reason for that. VTOLs are ideal for expeditionary-style militaries that don't expect to fight in their own country, or at least don't have to use their navy in order to get stuff to the front line. Naturally, this is big for the United States, unless the dirty French Canadians decide to conduct a strike and the next Red Dawn movie will need French to English subtitles. F-35s operate completely different than the Harriers they're replacing. In the hover part, at least, wings, big engine in the back, guy with a giant ego in the cockpit, that's all the same. While Harriers use nozzles to redirect force downward, which has been described as balancing a chair on one leg and standing on a beach ball with the other, F-35s use a shaft-driven lift fan system. Shaft-driven is coincidentally your mother's Native American name. This leverages a 50-inch two-stage lift fan right behind the cockpit, and that air is blasted downward, providing 20,000 pounds of thrust. While that's happening, the rear exhaust nozzle is able to rotate a full 90 degrees downward, providing another 18,000 pounds of thrust. Compared to the Harrier, hovering in a 35 is significantly easier, with computerized in-flight controls doing most of the heavy lifting. Plus, it can hover in worse weather conditions compared to the Call of Duty kill-streak plane. But focusing on the naval uses of these kinds of aircraft wasn't actually the original plan. Back in the mid-20th century, the original idea was mostly to have day-one survivability. In the opening days of the Cold War, it was expected that the first 24 hours would be a non-stop barrage of bombs, missiles, and nukes, with airfields being at the top of the target priority list. If you spread out your aircraft away from super obvious targets, it gives you a chance to have an air force to fight World War III for you, at least on day 2. Day 3 is not guaranteed. Harriers couldn't perform air support like an A-10, or dogfight like an F-15, sure, but I'd still prefer to be able to call that in for help rather than nothing at all. I do want to point out though that using an F-35B to hover in place and shoot at individual soldiers with a gun is quite possibly the worst way you could use a jet like that. Unrelated, my next video will be about me graduating from the Fun Police Academy. These days though, VTOLs are more thought of as a naval aviation thing. Gay. Aerial refueling and longer range / faster aircraft meant that newer modern aircraft were a little more strategically flexible, at least in European or Middle Eastern fighting contexts. But that only goes so far if you're floating out in the middle of the ocean. Aircraft carriers are a thing, obviously. They're also expensive, obviously. Expensive and quite possibly one of, if not the most complex and complicated things the human race actively designs and builds. Even though the United States has 11 operational aircraft carriers, they can't carry all the Navy and Marine aircraft we have at once. I mean, they could technically if the inside of your carrier looked like a cramped aviation museum, but not if you actually wanted to use said aircraft. That means that regardless, you're going to be leaving a lot of air power behind on the coast. Secondly, there will literally never be a time when all 11 aircraft carriers are operational at once. The maintenance cycles of these ships is measured in years and is based on a rotation schedule that spans decades. On a good day, the United States Navy only has 6 or 7 that can pick up and float off somewhere, and that's pushing it. Add in that we have decades of experience launching aircraft just fine off of boats, minus a few hiccups, so that leads the question, what niche does this capability offer that catapult naval jets do not? To answer that, we're going to go back about 40 years, to the British territory of the Falkland Islands off the coast of Argentina. Alright, time to simplify this conflict to the point of meaninglessness. Argentina said island was theirs. Argentina takes island. Meryl Streep wants to take it back. British Navy rolls in. The problem is that those islands are about 8,000 miles from London, while Argentina was, well, I don't want to say fighting in their backyard because there was still about 300 miles of ocean between them, but it was close enough to where launching that invasion wasn't exactly Hannibal crossing the Alps. The UK had retired its large traditional catapult-style aircraft carriers in the 1970s. However, they still did have ships like the HMS Hermes, a repurposed commando carrier, and the HMS Invincible, a ship purpose-built for jump-style aircraft like the Harrier. Both the UK and Argentina had issues with their whole aircraft fleet that they had to figure out how to overcome. The British had bombed the Port Stanley airport, forcing Argentina to base its aircraft further inland. Combine this with the fact that most of their planes lacked mid-air refuel capabilities, it led them to only having 5 minutes of flight time over the actual islands. The British, on the other hand, had to concern themselves with Argentina's anti-ship missiles, and while they weren't parked right next to the beach necessarily, they were still close enough to where their own Harriers were able to have at least 30 minutes over the island. That might not seem like a lot of time, and it's not, but it was the difference between controlling the airspace and reacting to the airspace. Having those VTOL aircraft meant that there was a way to project air power when it wasn't feasible any other way. Despite being outnumbered because they had to take on the entire Argentine Air Force at once and having no AWACS support, Harriers won every single air-to-air battle that they encountered, and not a single one was lost to another enemy plane. Despite contemporary reporting at the time, the British pilots did not in fact use VIFing in order to catch the enemy pilots off guard.
What's VIFing?
Not to be confused with yiffing, which is something I can only talk about on the members-only section of the channel. VIFing I can talk about here, and it's the idea that if you're being tailed by a bogey aircraft, you can transition from normal flying to hovering style flying in order to pull insanely tight turns. The idea is that the enemy aircraft will overshoot you and now you're on their tail. That ability has never actually been used in combat, and is, as this article puts it, an interesting technical capability with virtually no real-world utility. A tactical party trick, if you will. I mean, it didn't even work that great in Battlefield, so I'm not surprised it doesn't work in real life either. Unfortunately, the ability to hover does not actually grant any tactical advantage directly to the aircraft. It's a macroeconomics and theater level capability, and that is why there are 3 different F-35 models in the first place. The Air Force uses the A model, specialized for traditional flight, and the Navy only uses the C model, specialized for catapult launching and naval air defense. The only F-35Bs you'll find are in the US Marine Corps, at least if we're only talking about the United States. These can be carried by traditional carriers, but you're more likely to find them on amphibious assault ships like the America and Wasp class of vessels. And these are the same things shitting out ACVs and LCACs for the Marines. Having the Marines operate their own fleet of VTOL aircraft opens up a huge possibility for tactical flexibility. The Navy and Marines are probably going to have different priorities in a large-scale fight. But if the Crayon Eaters only had traditional catapult aircraft, it would mean the 2 branches would have to come to a compromise in terms of asset allocation and physical location of the carrier. Recent history is wrought with examples of boat people and beach invading people arguing over things like this for days. With these assault ships and the B model's ability to take off and land without a full runway, it means Marines get reliable stealth air cover without having to ask the Village People cosplayers to move their giant boat closer to land and put it at risk. This also comes in handy when Marines need to operate with other countries that don't have dedicated aircraft carriers, or at the very least have a handful of assault ships they don't mind clearing some parking space for. At the end of the day, VTOL aircraft might not be the best at anything, and cost a lot of money, and be maintenance nightmares. But damn it, it's better than nothing. Plus, if we figure out how to get CCA drones to fly as a wingman for these things, it won't matter if their turn radius sucks because all the fighting will be done by robots. One step closer to the apocalypse. And on that note, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.
Man, that was an awesome video. Look, I love Justin Taylor's take on most stuff. And I don't know if y'all can tell, but this guy was obviously Army. Learned a lot about the vertical takeoff jets. That's not something that I've ever seen personally up close. I have seen A-35s. I've seen them fly. I've seen them fire. I have not seen the F-35B though. Seeing those things and what they can do, I can only imagine what the Harrier version of that does. But like you say, you have to take into account lack of fuel and lack of ammunition because you're using the weight of the power capability to be able to vertically land and take off. The short landing and takeoff, the slot sounds a lot more interesting, saving fuel anyway. It was a good video. I encourage you to go check out Justin Taylor's channel in the description so you can check out the original content. But while you're there, be sure to give him a like on that video and be sure that you click subscribe to his video. Y'all take care. Thank you so much for watching. If you stayed this far into the video, you know the drill. Please mash that like button and mash the subscribe button. That helps his channel more than you know. Hope you come back and see us again in the future. Y'all take care. Have a great day.